Well, the BBC has already admitted that errors were made, and they have promised a full investigation. I got this assurance from Jamie Angus, the head of the BBC World Service. The concerns are a number. It has been reported that on the BBC Persian website in late December, they carried an article which referred to LGBT plus people in pejorative terms. And I understand that the rough equivalent in English of the Farsi language is the word faggot or pufta. So quite a negative, hostile, hateful slur. And then they also compared LGBT plus people to opium addicts and people who have sex with their siblings. Again, very, very offensive. And it's also alleged that the word abomination was used. Again, it was the Farsi equivalent. Now, I think it's quite extraordinary that the BBC does not have adequate monitoring controls in place to ensure that such language is not used, and that it took a public outcry by LGBT plus people in Iran to get the wording changed. There's also the question about the website, TV website news report in July 2019 about LGBT plus pride, which many Iranian LGBT people found was quite offensive and mocking. And there was actually seemed to be an attempt by the interviewer to out someone as gay live on air, even though he wasn't gay. And again, these are serious issues about quite grave departures from the BBC's normally high standards of ethics and journalism.
Who brought these examples to your attention?
Quite a number of LGBT plus Iranians.
I see. When was this? I mean, over what period?
This is late December.
See, and anything before then?
Well, previously, I have had a number of complaints over the years by LGBT plus Iranians who have complained about the homophobic tone of some BBC Persian reports. I've also received long-standing complaints from people from the Kurdish, Baluch, and Awazi Arab minorities in Iran about the way in which their issues, their human rights violations, are either not being reported on BBC Persian or reported very poorly, very infrequently, and sometimes with bias. So I think this raises a much bigger issue about who is controlling BBC Persian. Have the staff there had proper training in journalism and journalistic ethics? And I think there is also a concern, which I have had raised to me by a number of Iranian people, both inside in Iran and in exile, who have said that they sometimes wonder whether some of the staff at BBC Persian are either apologists for the Iranian regime or actively agents that have been placed there by the Iranian regime to exert influence in Western broadcasting.
Indeed. So you think it's that there is a wider issue here with BBC Persian as such, not simply on the LGBT plus front?
Yes, I do. I do think there's a wider question about the content, the editorializing, and the way in which some issues are being reported. And that's why I've called for a full investigation by the BBC into ascertain how do we know that these staff in BBC Persian are not operating either unconsciously or consciously or deliberately or on the instruction of the Iranian regime, because of course the language used about LGBT plus people recently is straight out of the playbook of state propagandists in Tehran. They use that kind of language about LGBT plus people, and it's quite shocking that the BBC Persian service should replicate it. Now, I'm not saying that they are agents of the Iranian regime, but we know that the government in Tehran does have a policy of seeking to place people in Western media and political circles. Well, we don't know absolutely for certain, but there have been repeated allegations and accusations that this is a deliberate policy by the Iranian regime. So I'm not saying BBC Persian has been infiltrated by Iranian agents, but I certainly think that possibility should be investigated.
And you would certainly say that in some aspects, BBC Persian reflects the general thinking of the Iranian regime as regards minority groups.
Yes, I'm not saying it's a generalized reflection, but certainly there are enough incidents over the years to require, I think, a full investigation, and that possibility needs to be looked at.
Do you think the BBC will give you a general inquiry? How do you think they're going to respond to your demand?
Well, the head of the World Service, Jamie Angus, has promised there will be a full investigation. He was acting on the instruction of Tim Davie, the Director General. So I'm fairly confident there will be an investigation. But of course, I will want to wait and see what that investigation actually reveals. And I've set a whole series of about 9 different requests about that investigation. I will await to see just how thorough it is. And if it's not thorough enough and if the questions are not answered, I will be seeking to get the parliamentary committees to look at it. I'm expecting that I will get members of Parliament and members of the House of Lords to do a full investigation themselves.
Yes, the BBC told us yesterday that they were preparing a response to your complaint, which is due. We all look forward to seeing that. They also told us that the offending article was a freelance opinion piece. How do you respond to that?
Well, of course, BBC Persian is quite entitled, and it's very welcome that it accepts freelance pieces for its website. But of course, they should be thoroughly checked and vetted. And it's very, very surprising that a respected international broadcaster like the BBC would accept any freelance contribution without thoroughly reading it and checking that it conforms to BBC journalistic and ethical standards. So that's my big shock. And of course, this may have been an innocent oversight, but I don't think that's a good enough excuse. I think, the BBC has a responsibility to look at very carefully, to examine thoroughly anything it puts out on its website, on audio, or on TV. It needs to ensure that it conforms to the BBC's standards of non-discrimination. And quite clear that has not happened. Now, that could have been, as maybe claimed, an accident and oversight, but that's not good enough. It is the responsibility of the BBC to ensure that everything it puts out conforms to the standards that it expects and pledges to uphold. And, I think the director of BBC Persian really has to consider their position, because to allow things like this to go out without proper oversight, that is really a major error. And, if this was about directly maybe a racist issue, I'm sure that BBC would be, I would suspect that the BBC would be asking the director to reconsider their position.
Did you make any overtures to BBC Persian directly, or have you just gone to the Director General's office?
Well, based on previous complaints that many people have made to BBC Persian over the years and failed to get any response or any adequate response, I thought it was a waste of time. I have no confidence that BBC Persian itself can address the issue. And that's why I went to the top, to Tim Davie, the Director General of the BBC. I'm sure that he and other senior staff are as horrified as I am. They would have never sanctioned this, but it's astonishing that the director of BBC Persian did. And as I said, he can claim, or the director can claim, that it had nothing to do with them, that they didn't write it, that they accidentally overlooked it. But it is their responsibility to ensure that what goes out in the name of BBC Persian conforms to the high standards that the BBC professes to uphold.
Yes, they will be obliged now. You've raised this to do something about it. Who would you think should sit on an independent inquiry into these allegations?
Well, for example, there could be an appointee from the National Union of Journalists, which does represent many BBC staff, but which also has a very strong code of ethics, which all journalists are required to abide by. There's the Campaign for Press and Broadcasting Freedom, and of course, possibly some members of Parliament and independent media commentators. Those are the kind of people I'd expect to see sit on an independent inquiry. I suspect, however, the BBC will do an internal inquiry first. I think that's their commitment. And it's only, I suppose, if that internal inquiry is not adequate that we will have to push for a more independent one. And again, I think that members of Parliament will be brought into play to ensure that there is a serious investigation, whether that be internal or independent.
The very interesting thing about the idea that BBC Persian, it might be too strong to say infiltrated, but maybe not, by apologists or even agents for the Iranian government. How strong is the evidence you have for this?
Well, it is anecdotal, but it's been over many years, and that still doesn't mean to say that it's right, that it's correct, but it does incline me to think that there is a problem here with who is on the staff of BBC Persian. If there'd been one or two incidents maybe over many years, I would not be worried. But when you hear repeated complaints over many years, you've got to sort of, start to wonder, who are the people on the staff? How are they recruited? How do we know that they are acting truly independently, that they are committed to the BBC's standards of journalism and ethics? Or how do we know they're not their primary allegiance, or maybe their inadvertent allegiance or unconscious allegiance is towards the policies and propaganda of the Tehran regime? And I think this is a very, very, very serious issue, because BBC Persian has a big reach among Iranians around the world. And what it puts out has great influence. It carries great weight. And therefore, we need to know that the people there are not acting either off their own bat or directly under Tehran's instruction in the interests of the Iranian regime.